So Bob's comments in our reflections this morning are going to be based in part on this passage from 1 Thessalonians, 5th chapter, verses 12 to 28. 1 Thessalonians is an early letter of Paul's to a missionary church only about 20 years after Jesus' departure. It's a very early letter. But at the time he wrote it, he was no longer living and working with them. But he'd received a mostly positive account from Timothy of the Thessalonian spiritual health. So after he addresses a few concerns that had come up with that particular church, he closes his letter with some final counsel in the verses that we're going to hear. Chapter 5, verses 12 to 28, and I'm reading from Eugene Peterson's The Message. And now, friends, we ask you to honor those leaders who work so hard for you, who have been given the responsibility of urging and guiding you along in your obedience. Overwhelm them with appreciation and love. Get along among yourselves, each doing your part. Our counsel is that you warn the freeloaders to get a move on, gently encourage the stragglers, and reach out for the exhausted, pulling them to their feet. Be patient with each person, attentive to individual needs. And be careful that when you get on each other's nerves, you don't snap at each other. Look for the best in each other, and always do your best to bring it out. Be cheerful no matter what. Pray all the time. Thank God no matter what happens. This is the way God wants you who belong to Jesus Christ to live. Don't suppress the Spirit, and don't stifle those who have a word from the Master. On the other hand, don't be gullible. Check out everything and keep only what's good. Throw out anything tainted with evil. May God himself, the God who makes everything holy and whole, make you holy and whole. Put you together, spirit, soul, and body, and keep you fit for the coming of our Master, Jesus Christ. The one who called you is completely dependable. If he said it, he'll do it. Friends, keep up your prayers for us. Greet all the followers of Jesus there with a holy embrace. And make sure this letter gets read to all the brothers and sisters. Don't leave anyone out. The amazing grace of Jesus Christ be with you.
I am here to invite you into this continued practice of doing discerning, learning, and growing. And I am saying this week we're going to delve a little deeper into discerning. Today we're actually going to discern together. Now it's something simple, hopefully something that we're not emotionally attached to, but in some ways there may be some. Each month, we normally, on the third Sunday, have a potluck. We've started that again recently. And on October 16th, which would be the third Sunday of October, Pastor Julie, the pastor of the Presbyterian Church, has scheduled her installation, which means that the kitchen downstairs won't be available for us on October 16th. So the work is to delve into discernment, right? To try it out, to practice a skill, a spiritual exercise. So it's like when you learn to swim, right? You learn to swim in a pool that you can stand up in, right? So as we practice discernment on something, as we try some new muscles out, maybe, we do it on a decision that isn't groundbreaking, but hopefully the process might be groundbreaking for us. Chris will be leading us in this discernment in a little bit. We're going to move over here after I say a few things. But I'm hoping I can give us some framing around the discernment, like the idea that discernment is a spiritual practice. It gets mentioned in the Bible like prayer or worship or fasting or devotion and reading, right? It's a practice. It's a thing we do. And I want to invite you into this practice. And even if you don't plan on coming to our October potluck, if you know you won't be in town or whatever, if we discern that we still have it, right? I guess. That might be on the table. I hope that the work of discernment can be life-giving to you. Now, as Chris said, Paul's letter to the Thessalonians is thought to be one of Paul's first letters. We heard at this very conclusion that he tells us several things about discernment. First, it just seems like it's essential to our journey, right? This figuring out what's right. Hear what has happened, but don't fall prey. Don't be gullible, I think is how Peterson puts it. And discernment involves the spirits. It involves one good and maybe some bad ones, right? Some evil ones. We've heard that language. And we also hear that we can and should do discernment. It's not something we should wait for someone else to do. It's something that we should hold on to what is good and throw out what is evil. The thing I want to talk a little bit about as we explore discernment is that discernment is different than decision making, but it's not totally different. The most basic explanation of what we're trying to do, of what discernment is we're trying to find out what's God up to and how can we be part of it. But there are things that complicate it in multiple ways. One of the things is we have our own stuff, right? Our own fear, anxiety, values that the world has taught us, and those stand in the way of us hearing what God has for us, right? I mean, even churches hold expectations and priorities that can get in the way of what God's doing. I don't think any of us would disagree with that. Also, should we just make a decision or discern, right? I believe that we should involve God's will in just about every choice we make, right? I think, but discernment can be a very complicated process sometimes. Many decisions we make won't be practical for discernment every day, like what socks am I going to wear, or what am I eating for breakfast, or how am I going to get to church, right? Normally, the October potluck that decision would have been handled by a show of hands during the time of during our congregational sharing, or maybe the elders would have made a decision. But then the next level of discernment and decision making is that even our breakfast or which socks or which transportation may have already had discernment involved, right? So at my house, we've discerned that we prioritize bicycles over cars. That's the way we want to get around if we can. But if it's raining, then I make a decision. I'm going to drive the car, right? But the discernment has already been made that we're a one-car family. We ride bikes if possible, and those kind of things. It may be, right? Like if you order a lunch, if you go out to lunch, you might make a decision. What sounds good, right? How much money do I have, maybe? Am I in a hurry? Is this going to be fast or slow? So the decision, once you're at a restaurant, feels like a decision. But sometimes there's earlier discernment we've done. Maybe we've chosen to be a vegetarian or a vegan, right? Maybe we won't go to a certain restaurant because we understand that they don't treat their workers properly, right? That's discernment. Maybe we think this restaurant creates too much waste. Or maybe at this restaurant, we know that if we order a salad, it comes in styrofoam, but if we order a sandwich, it comes on a plate, so we're going to get the sandwich to not make waste, right? But there's decisions we've made that, like, trash is bad, right? That's more of a discernment we've made that informs decisions, right? So that's why it's a little complicated. I would say that there's that layers of interweaving discernment and decisions happen, right? Sometimes we discern when it's big things, and then that informs those discernment to make these little everyday decisions. So if the goal of discernment is understanding God's will and figuring out how to join in, then I think there's a few things we have to bring to the table. I think we must be humble. We must be able to be wrong. We must be able to be corrupted by the world, right? We must be able to have motivations and fears that affect us. We must be willing to look at those. We have to be self-reflective. We should look at our first responses, right? What are the assumptions, or what are the priorities that we already hold, or what are the fears that are driving those first responses? What might prevent us from making a decision that reflects God's will, wholly, completely. We might even use the word, I would use the word that we might even be a little suspicious, right? Why am I saying that? Why did I criticize that person's words? Why don't I like that? What's uncomfortable for me? You might want to look out for phrases like, we have to do it that way, or I don't like that, right? Or that's how we've always done it, right? Those kind of phrases might set off a little beep, 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 like, oh, we might not be doing discernment. We might have moved into I want, right? Which is natural, right? The song, Holy Spirit comes to, as we say, we're weak and fearful and selfish, right? There's pieces of that in us that can drive our decisions if we're not careful, if we're not attentive. I would look out as we talk to each other, because we'll be doing it together, look out for phrases like, why would you do that? That seems like a bad idea. I think those can border on what Paul labels as evil things, when we dismiss or diminish other people. I think that introspection is essential to this process. Questions like, what am I afraid of? Or why don't I like that idea? It doesn't mean that you not liking it isn't of God, but let's take a second and figure out where it might come from. So, based on my explanation, I hope you're getting that discernment isn't necessarily comfortable, right? And sometimes it's not really natural for most of us, right? It's not something we've done, and we've done it before, but there's always room to grow into this. And sometimes we feel the Spirit. Like sometimes we can feel connected, and we can feel the Spirit speaking through our gut instinct, right? But as Paul says, let's take time. Let's test that Spirit. Let's look it over. So what I'm going to do right now is invite you into a time of greeting and growing our relationship to pass the peace with one another. While you do that, we're going to move over to the seating area by the whiteboard, where Chris is going to facilitate the discernment work. You're welcome to bring a hymnal with you, because we'll finish our worship over there to sing our last song, which is New Heavens and New Earth. And I want you to join us all in this holy work of discernment. So please get up and pass the peace and join us over here.
Good morning. How are you doing?